the European Union 42 countries came together and made a call to Russia. He had recently bombed the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, endangering humanity on the entire continent. The delegation that met for this deck called for the immediate withdrawal of the Russian army from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The nuclear expert official said in a statement that the bombardments on the power plant present a danger of radiation leakage. He warned the citizens living in the region to leave there for a while. The danger at the facility, which is the largest in Europe, has sparked global concern. Last weekend, it was announced that another successful operation was carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine in Luhansk. The Russian forces that captured the Wagner base in Luhansk in recent months were sheltering there and positioning their equipment. During the weekend, Ukrainian troops conducting research in the region with Bayraktar UAVs noticed the Russian army at the Wagner base. They examined the area for a certain period of time and began to prepare for the operation. With a successful Bayraktar TB2 and HIMARS missiles supporting it from the ground, they inflicted another heavy defeat on the Russian troops. Currently, there are hot conflicts on the territory of Ukraine on many fronts. While the control of some regions has passed to the Ukrainian army, there are still some areas dominated by the Russian army. In some areas, the attacks of the Russian army have been repulsed and have taken a defensive position. However, there has been an increase in attacks by Russian troops in the Kharkiv region over the past week. We know that the Russian army is having problems with soldiers and that there is a shortage of infantry. Speaking at an opening program on this topic, Russian President Vladimir Putin invited allied countries to support. He said that if they send soldiers to their countries, they will provide them with a professional education and enable them to become a professional soldier. Besides, in this way, Russia, which is in its own country, will try to eliminate the lack it has experienced on the ground by using the troops of its allies in the Ukrainian war. He also claimed that the countries that provide this support will provide them with many types of support, from weapons to armored vehicles and artillery to unmanned aerial vehicles, if they need it in the future. However, after this invasion attempt that it launched on February 24 and the brutal war crimes it committed in Ukraine, many countries do not trust Russia and do not want to side with it. The United States provided Ukraine with the military support that Russia has requested today many years ago. After the war that Russia started in Ukraine in 2014 and the annexation of Crimea, Ukraine learned a lesson from this. The Ukrainian army at that time was not as experienced and strong as it is today. From that year to this time, many high-ranking soldiers and special teams received training in America. The United States has been providing special training to soldiers from Ukraine since 2014. He almost turned them into a team of Delta Force soldiers, America's special team. After learning this information, it became clear where the incredible resistance power of the heroic Ukrainian soldiers in this war came from. The American military has provided the Ukrainian armed forces with special training that has been going on for many years, and they have been engaged in many exercises. Since the Russian army and Putin did not know this information, they thought that they would soon conquer the region by entering Ukraine, as they did in 2014. But for such a war, the armed forces of Ukraine were in great preparation and wanted to take their revenge on Russia. Ukrainian soldiers experienced a lot of difficulties in America, and in return completed an incredible training. It is not known how many soldiers have been trained in the United States so far. Ukrainian troops are putting another obstacle in the way of the Russian army every day. The Russian army, which is located between Kryvyi and Kharkiv and is trying to send support to the intense clashes in Kharkiv, has been decapitated. Last month, the bridge most used by Russia was destroyed, and the Russian army was passing many ammunition and armored vehicles and equipment there. Later, the Russian troops who started to use the bridge on the Dnipro sides by going further south were detected by Bayraktar UAVs and destroyed on that bridge with HIMARS missiles. Finally, the third bridge over the Dnipro River was destroyed this week. The Russian army was prevented from transporting its heavy military equipment and ammunition. It is believed that the intense clashes in the Kharkiv region will calm down due to the blocking of logistics shipments by the Russian army. It is believed that the Ukrainian armed forces will soon clear the region of Russian soldiers and take control of the region by organizing operations against Russian troops who cannot receive support. It is considered as difficult as impossible for Russia to provide Kharkov with ammunition supplies. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry announced in a press release on Monday that Russian forces have increased their shelling of the city of Kharkiv, located in the northeast of Ukraine. The Ukrainian army, on the other hand, announced that the Russian armies between Donetsk and Kharkiv are trying to decimate the roads they use as supply lines. A town south of the city of Kharkiv was reportedly hit by Russian cannons and rockets. In the center of the city, however, there were no heavy losses. NASAMS air defense systems from the United States are working selflessly to prevent serious losses in residential areas where citizens are concentrated. The missiles that came to the town were reportedly fired from the city of Belgorod. The area where Russia carried out the attack was 25 miles from the fronts where the war between the two countries was decimated. It seems that Russia is trying to harm innocent people with this. The Russian army is moving the war from the fronts to the outside, to the settlements. It is demanded that Russian commanders and Putin be tried for these crimes. We have told many countries in the early days that this war initiated by Russia will not affect only two countries politically and economically. With the blocking actions of Russia in the ports, Ukrainian ships could not make shipments and could not send grain, which is the most important export item, to the countries that needed it. Since March, no grain has been delivered to the countries, and the food crisis has started to be talked about around the world. Even African countries trying to cope with hunger were greatly affected by this war. After months of disagreements, as a result of long meetings with the initiatives of Turkey and the United Nations, 2 weeks ago the two sides sat down at the table in Istanbul and signed an agreement. After the signed agreement, if both sides comply with the rules, the next 4 months will not be an obstacle for the ships to be shipped. The ships loaded and shipped from Ukrainian ports are first anchored in Istanbul and inspected by Turkish and British delegations and continue to be shipped upon receipt of approval. The first ships that set off last week reached the ports. The first shipments were sent to Egypt and Lebanon. On this day, according to the statement made by Ukrainian Economy Minister Oleksandr Kubrikov, the ship loaded with 23,000 tons of wheat is ready for shipment and will depart from the Ukrainian port of Pevdeniai and be delivered to Ethiopia. The ship, which was going to Ethiopia, arrived at the port of Pevdeniai on Friday and is constantly being monitored by satellite, and it seems that it is currently in the port of Pevdeniai. This ship will be the first cargo ship to go to Africa since the beginning of the war. Ukrainian President Zelensky said he was happy that the ships had started shipping and that many countries had been waiting for wheat and grain for months.